I never thought a single night could change my life so completely. One evening, I came home from running errands to the smell of smoke and the sight of flames consuming my house. My heart stopped. Everything I had worked for, everything that held memories of my life and family, was gone. Furniture, photographs, letters, mementos, all reduced to ashes in a matter of hours. I stood there frozen, unable to process the devastation. The fire department arrived, but there was nothing left to save. All I could do was watch as my home, the place where I had raised my children, where I had laughed, cried, and celebrated life's milestones, disappeared before my eyes. That night, I slept in my car, shivering from the cold and exhaustion, holding onto the little I could salvage in a small bag. I thought of my son, David. He lived in the next city with his wife, Emily. Surely they would help me. Surely they would welcome me with open arms. The next morning, I called David. "David," I said, my voice trembling. I need a place to stay. My house burned down last night. Everything is gone." There was a pause on the line, and then his words pierced me like a knife. "Mom, Emily, she doesn't want you here." I felt my knees buckle. "What? David, I have nowhere else to go. Please." "I'm sorry," he said. "It's just, Emily doesn't want you living with us. Maybe you should figure something out." I couldn't believe it. After everything I had done for him, after every sacrifice I had made, this was his answer. I felt rejected, abandoned, and utterly alone. Tears streamed down my face as I hung up the phone, wondering how a mother could be pushed away by her own child. I had always been a strong woman. I raised my children with love and care, sacrificing countless hours to give them better opportunities than I had. But now, at this moment, all that strength felt useless. I had nowhere to go, no home, and no support. The city felt cold, indifferent, and unfamiliar. As I sat in my car, I realized I had to make a decision. I could wallow in despair, or I could find a way to survive. The fire had taken my house, but it hadn't taken me. I was still here. I still had my mind, my determination, and my courage. I wiped my tears and made a plan. I reached out to local shelters, but many were full, and the few that had space were far from where I could get work or necessities. I didn't want to burden anyone, and I didn't want to feel like a charity case. That's when I remembered a small guest house near the outskirts of the city. It wasn't fancy, but it offered a roof over my head and a warm bed. When I arrived, I felt a strange mix of relief and shame. Relief that I had a place to stay, and shame that I was forced into such a position at my age. After everything I had done for my family, the room was small, with a single bed and a tiny bathroom, but it was enough. That night, I lay awake, thinking of my son, wondering how someone I loved so deeply could turn away from me in my time of need. The next morning, I walked into town to see what work I could find. I was in my late 50s, no formal education beyond high school, and had mostly spent my life raising my children and managing a household. But I knew I couldn't give up. I had to survive, and I had to rebuild. I found a small cafe, hiring part-time help. The manager was kind and agreed to take me on, though I knew I would have to work harder than anyone else there. My hands shook as I held the broom and cleaned tables, as I washed dishes and served customers. My body ached in ways I hadn't experienced in years. But with each task, I reminded myself, I am stronger than I think. I will not give up. Days turned into weeks. I settled into a routine, working long hours, saving what little money I could, and slowly beginning to regain some stability. But the thought of my son and his wife haunted me. I couldn't understand how someone you raised with love could reject you so completely. One evening, as I returned to my small room, I cried quietly to myself, not just for the house I had lost, but for the relationship that had been severed. I realized that sometimes the people we love most are not capable of giving love in return, and that true strength is found in moving forward, even when it hurts. It was during those quiet nights that I began reflecting on my life. I thought about all the moments I had sacrificed for my children, the sleepless nights, the financial struggles, the support I had given without expecting anything in return. And yet, here I was, abandoned. It was heartbreaking, but in that heartbreak, I found a spark of determination. I realized that I didn't need anyone's approval to rebuild my life. I had the power within me to create a new chapter. A chapter where I would not depend on others' acceptance to feel worthy, loved, or capable. That week, while cleaning tables at the cafe, I met an older woman named Mrs. Thompson. She was a regular customer and immediately took an interest in me. Over cups of coffee and small conversations, she learned about my situation, the fire, my son's rejection, and my struggle to find footing. "I think you're incredibly brave," she said one day. "Most people would crumble after losing everything, but you're still standing. You have more strength than you realize." Her words stuck with me. Maybe I had been looking for validation from the wrong people. Maybe I didn't need my son's approval to feel strong or capable. Maybe the life I needed to build was my own, not someone else's expectation of me. From that point on, I made a promise to myself. I would rebuild, not just my home, but my sense of worth, my confidence, and my life. I would work hard, find new opportunities, and show myself that even when abandoned, I could thrive. Little did I know, life had a way of surprising me. A chance encounter, a kind stranger, and circumstances I could never have imagined would soon change everything. But that story begins only after embracing the pain, finding courage, and choosing to believe in oneself. The days following my move to the small guest house were some of the hardest I'd ever experienced. Each morning, I woke before sunrise, aching from work and worry, but determined not to let despair take over. I reminded myself over and over, I am still here. I am still capable. I can rebuild. I began to focus on what I could control. My son's rejection hurt deeply, but I realized I could not change his mind, or the mind of his wife, Emily. Their choices were theirs, and no matter how much I loved them, I had to find a way to stand on my own 2 feet. That realization was painful, but freeing. I no longer felt trapped by their approval or love. I could move forward independently. At the cafe, I worked tirelessly, often staying late to make sure everything was perfect. I cleaned tables until my arms ached, polished silverware until my fingers were raw, and served customers with a smile, even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. Some days I cried quietly in the restroom, allowing myself a moment to grieve, not just for the fire or my lost home, but for the pain of being unwanted by my own family. But slowly, day by day, I began to notice small victories. A customer thanked me for my patience. A co-worker smiled at my efforts. Each acknowledgement, no matter how small, reminded me that my work mattered, that my presence mattered, and that I was capable of contributing to the world around me. One afternoon, as I was cleaning tables, a well-dressed man approached me. He introduced himself as Mr. Andrews, a local businessman who frequented the cafe. He struck up a conversation, asking about my life, my interests, and my story. I hesitated at first. What could I possibly share about my current situation without seeming desperate? But something about his kind eyes and attentive listening made me open up. I told him briefly about the fire, about losing everything, and about the rejection from my son and his wife. I expected sympathy at best, pity at worst. Instead, he smiled gently. "You're remarkable," he said. "Most people would have given up by now, but you're still standing. That determination, that resilience, it's rare and powerful." His words struck me deeply. For the first time since the fire, I felt seen, not as someone who had lost everything, but as someone capable, resilient, and worthy of respect. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Andrews and I kept in touch. He encouraged me to consider new opportunities, offered advice on rebuilding my life, and shared stories of people who had overcome tremendous obstacles. His belief in my potential began to rekindle a sense of hope I hadn't felt in months. One day, he surprised me with an invitation. "I have a project I think you'd be perfect for," he said. "It's not easy, but it's meaningful, and it could help you get back on your feet." I felt nervous, my hands trembling, but the spark of courage I had been nurturing over the past weeks pushed me forward. I agreed to meet him the next day. Little did I know, this decision would mark the beginning of a turning point in my life, an opportunity I never would have imagined if I had allowed despair to take hold.